With the release of Genshin Impact 2.8, Heizou has finally been released in the Genshin Impact live server. Is he a good character or is he just mediocre? Today we're going to be talking about our overall first impression of Heizou, the brand new 4-star Anemo characters. Now while Heizou is a Callus user, he doesn't play like a traditional Callus user where he preferred to use his martial art instead. Now that was really cool as well as really fun to play with, but today instead of talking about fun factor, we're going to be focusing on gameplay. Does he have any obvious gameplay problem like perhaps energy recharge? That's what we're going to be focusing on. Now usually on this channel we also like to talk about character pull value, but as Heizou is a 4-star, that's not really a huge concern because you should never really be pulling a banner for a specific 4-star characters. On top of that, you'll eventually be able to pick up every single 4-star character in the Genshin Impact. But as always, before we start, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm a lot, and let's get started. As a Anemo Callus user, Heizou's primary job is to equip the 4-set VV and be a on-field driver for various teams like most likely Tasers, which with Fischls, Sigils, and then Beidou or Yalen or something like that, or even another team like National Team or Freeze Team. Throughout my playtest, both ADC build, also known as attack power, damage, and crit build, as well as full elemental mastery build to do swirl damage are both quite viable and good. Of course, the ADC build is more focused on using his punch damage to do a bunch of elemental skill damage, while the EM build is more focused on proccing elemental reaction through the swirl, primarily being utilized in the Taser team. Let's start with what I liked and enjoyed about Heizou. When I was playing Heizou as a Anemo on-field driver, I found him quite comfortable and very smooth to play with, especially compared to the other character occupying the same position, which is Sucrose. The most common complaint when people play Sucrose as a driver, especially in Taser team, is that she is rather clunky to play. Now obviously that is a preference depending on person to person. However, it is true that Sucrose does have quite long animation lock. When I play Sucrose Taser, the first thing that I notice is I often spam a lot of dashes to get out of my animation since they are just very long. And that often led to me running out of stamina very fast. Very often my stamina bar would be in the red zone or even completely empty very quickly. On the other hand, I don't notice that big of a problem at all on Heizou because once again, not only has very fast animation, but he also have a stamina reduction passive that can assist you in managing your stamina a little bit. So overall, it just felt much smoother to play. Overall, it makes it a lot more feasible and easier to spam charge attack on Heizou, which is quite important if you're ever playing a elemental mastery build, as his charge attack doesn't have ICD, which means that it will always swirl. The same somewhat go with his elemental skill as well. You just tap it and it's very quick to come out. Even though it has a whole version that you can do to get up to 4 stack and do more damage, usually from the second rotation and beyond, you'll by default have 4 stack thanks to his A1 talent, which gives you a stack every single time you swirl while he's on field. And that is very easy to do since again, Heizou is a on-field Anemo driver. On your first rotation, what you can do is a N1 CQ and followed by another N1 to get a quick 4 stack. He has decently low cooldown on his elemental skill, but especially on his elemental burst, and the energy cost is only 40, which is very low. That means that even if you don't run a lot of energy recharge or even like hardly at all, you can still spam his elemental burst off cooldown. However, most importantly is that both his elemental skill and his elemental burst does a huge amount of stagger, which could be useful as when you're staggering the enemy can't really attack you, which is one of the reasons why he is so much more comfortable to play than Sucrose, because well, the enemy could hardly attack you when you're just staggering them all around. I never really noticed that to be a big issue since Heizou's normal attack have really good tracking. To quickly demonstrate here, I have max stack on my Heizou and I'm gonna use my elemental skill to punch away one of these hillagers. However, you notice that my next normal attack will then immediately connect due to the fact that it tracked me forward about a good amount of distance. So for example here, you notice that when I punch it actually moves forward, but the punch itself also come out at a certain distance. So overall, even though Heizou kind of knock enemy away, I didn't notice that to be an issue at all during my gameplay, simply because my next normal attack will then track me on top of the enemy, kind of like how Ito charge attack does. Now while his stagger could provide a good amount of comfort, unfortunately it can also act as anti-grouping, pushing the enemy away from each other, making it so that your AoE fail to hit multiple enemy. And this is even true for his own normal attack, which will swirl enemy element. When you perform a swirl, it actually does it in a small small AoE where not only it applied the element onto the other enemy next to it, but it also does swirl damage on the enemy next to it as well, which make you do double damage. However, when the enemy are pushed away from each other, they are no longer close enough for the swirl to hit both of them. And so not only you lose the elemental infusion to swirl it around the enemy, you also lose half of your damage from swirling, which is terrible. Combined with the fact that Heizou basically have no grouping, this could be seen at a really bad factor that he staggered the enemy away around, because it causes you to lose a lot of damage. With that being said, let's slowly talk about bad thing about Heizou and why, to be honest, he's just kind of a meh character or even bad. So first thing first, of course, is that he has no grouping capability. Once again, while his C2 has a small amount of grouping, it is basically non-existent, especially when we're comparing to basically other Anemo unit that are like Venti, Kazu, or even Sucrose, who is his 4-star Anemo competitor. Starting off, if you ever play Heizou as a buffer, then his buff is strictly worse than Sucrose, because while both of them can carry TTDS as well as the VV artifact set, Sucrose can provide to her teammate about 200 or so elemental mastery, while Heizou can only provide 80. So that means Sucrose is strictly better by 120 elemental mastery, on top of the fact that there is the potential of using Sucrose C6 to provide another 20% elemental damage, while Heizou doesn't have that at all. So as a buffer, Heizou is strictly worse than Sucrose. To be honest, strictly speaking, if we're to compare Heizou and Sucrose together, Sucrose just outclassed Heizou in every single category, aside from the fact that maybe Heizou animation is a little cooler. If I have to choose, I would pretty much choose Sucrose in every single scenario possible. Keep in mind that Sucrose is a really strong character, potentially one of the best in the game, and to be honest, Heizou can somewhat replace Sucrose as a taser driver, while certainly it is worse in some category and direction. As I mentioned in the earlier part of the video, it is more comfortable to play, at least for me, so it could come down to a preference of if you want a stronger team where Sucrose can provide more damage, better utility, and better grouping, versus you just want to have a good time, more fun, and a lot more comfortable. In that case, I think Heizou could be a good choice. Overall, I did really enjoy my time with Heizou. He was very fun and satisfying to play, and he was much more comfy to play than Sucrose, which could be a huge deciding factor for some of you out there. At the end of the day, Heizou is still a Anemo VV carrier that can also carry TTDS, and to be honest, that's already better than 80% of the 4-star character out there, especially some of the more recent one like Kuki Shinobu. If you're a brand new player coming into Genshin Impact and you don't have Sucrose, and then you roll on the Kazu banner to obtain both Kazu and Heizou, well, that's your 2 Anemo character for your 2 side. Or you have Sucrose and Heizou but no other Anemo character like no Kazu. Then you run Sucrose on one side, maybe with your national team, and then you run Heizou on the other side as your Anemo taser driver. That's a really solid setup for some people out there. I would say he could be valuable depending on the player, the account, or even the context. With that being said though, that is my overall first impression of Heizou, including some of the good thing about him, but also some of the bad thing about him. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time when we talk about Kazu.